All right, well, welcome everybody to the mEducation Alliance Symposium Coding Global. While we're waiting just for a few minutes for other people to log on and enter from the waiting room, please feel free to fill out the poll that's on your screen, and we'll start momentarily. Thanks so much. It's like a race and Africa's ahead. Isn't that cool? Come on, poll people, get your continents in.
I like how it says how many of the total have voted. So you know who you are if you haven't voted.
Yeah. All right, if outreach to any coding programs in Antarctica, please contact us afterwards and we'll make sure that we invite them.
I'm seeing a need for outreach to Australia. I don't know, the zero there. It's speaking volumes.
Mm. I see Josie has raised her hand.
Are they from Antarctica?
Oh, good point. Maybe. Good point.
Maybe.
And folks, thanks for dropping who you are also in the chat. That's perfect opportunity to be able to share experiences, folks. And as we'll be using the chat function quite a bit throughout this webinar, including for capturing questions for our presenters in the first hour, I would encourage people at the end of the event, before we conclude the event, to cut and paste the chat documents if there is useful information there that you'd like to save. And then we will be sending out post-event materials, but I typically find, like, when an event has concluded, that if I didn't capture the chat, that I'm a little bit disappointed. So, all right, well, maybe should we start off? Looks like we have some great polling data with folks that have filled out their information. Nicole, should we just go to the, well, it looks exciting. It looks like we have quite a number of participants from Africa who have joined and then all parts of the world, with the notable exception of Australia and Antarctica. But it's great that we have so many participants. I believe we had around over 250 participants who had registered for this event. So we're really excited and appreciate your taking the time. Nicole, do you want to leave up the poll when I give my opening comments, or should I just go straight in?
We have the slides for you to go through for the opening. So.
Okay, so we'll pull down the poll then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, folks, for filling that out as well. Okay, well, my name is Anthony Bloom, and I'm at USAID as the Senior Technology for Development Specialist. I also am the founder and supporter of the Mobiles for Education Alliance. And the mEducation Alliance is a consortia of leading organizations around the world that are focused on education technology, principally for the use of technology in lower resource settings. The mEducation Alliance has been in existence since 2010, and I hope a number of the folks that are joining us today have benefited from some of the events that we've held previously. Every year we have had an annual symposia. It so happens that last year's theme was digital literacy and training. And so if you want to see some of the great presentations from last year's event, please go to the mEducation Alliance website. We are really excited that today's event is being co-hosted with other collaborating partners, including the EdTech Hub, with our colleagues with support from UK Aid and the Global Innovation Exchange. And the collection of presentations for the first hour are actually, they've come through a variety of vehicles. The mEducation Alliance puts out an annual call for presentation proposals. Some of the presentations have come in through that. With our collaboration with the EdTech Hub, we've done a COVID-19 EdTech idea call. Some of the ideas came in from that. and then others basically through previous participation in digital literacy events. The first hour will be some of those organizations that have competed to present in that regard, and we're delighted to have them join us. And then the second hour is going to be a number of organizations that are just leaders in the global, the coding global space that we've invited to be part of a roundtable discussion. You'll get an opportunity to hear about some of their great work, but we will be organizing future events so we could get more of an in-depth explanation of their programs as well. But we thought we'd shake up things a little bit with having a 2-hour format that would include some presentations at the beginning and then an opportunity to hear from our roundtable participants. This event is part of an ongoing series focused on digital literacy and coding global. And for those that don't subscribe to the mEducation Alliance newsletter, we'll drop in the chat box the link so you could subscribe, and then you could see upcoming events as well. It's also been part of a series of events, again, that we've done as part of the 2020 theme for the mEducation Alliance Symposium on play and technology for lifelong learning, and also as part of the COVID-19 EdTech idea call. I want to start by thanking the organizing team that have been engaged in helping us with this event. So there you go. We'll go to the thank yous first. So that's terrific. So a number of individuals have been involved. Maybe they could just wave their hands just in terms of the organizing team. Davis, Julie, Lisa, Julie, Scott. Thank you for your assistance. There's a variety of roles that they'll be playing in prompting contributions through the chat box. What we'll be doing is collecting your questions through the chat box, and then we'll be using those to help feed into the contributions for the first and the second round. So thanks ahead of time for how much work that it's taken to put together this webinar. So why digital literacy and coding global? Well, obviously there's relevance of broader digital literacy skills and training. It's important, particularly in light of COVID-19, that individuals have access to content and have the skills to be able to access it. We're also keenly interested in marginalized populations having access to content and the ability to be able to create their own content. It's also important as a digital literacy skill to critically examine content, which is accessed, and finally, to be content creators ourselves and with populations with whom we work. So why we're really excited about today's theme of Coding Global, it's a variety of initiatives that are basically providing the platforms by which individuals could acquire coding skills so that they can contribute to the world fora. So in terms of logistics, what we'll be doing for the first hour is we have 4 presentations. The presenters will each approximately have 7 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes of Q&A that will take us close to the hour. We hope to have a brief break and its transition between the first and the second hour. Again, you could put your questions in the chat box. And in the second hour, we'll have a number of participants who will be presenting as part of our roundtable. So without further ado, I want to welcome our first hour presenters from Microbit Foundation. Maybe we'll go back just one slide. Sorry. We'll have Garth Stockdale, who's the CEO. From Enable, Irene Mbara-Kirika, founder and executive director. From the International Education Foundation, Elaine Meti, who's the president and director. And from Ghana Code Club as well. They were excited to have these presenters join us today and to speak about their particular initiatives. So let's start with, I'm sorry, I should have said from Ghana Code Club is Ernestina Apia, founder and CEO. Thanks for joining us. So Gareth, are you ready to give us your presentation?
I am indeed, Anthony, and hello to everybody.
Take it away.
I'm afraid my video doesn't seem to be working. Every time I say start video, it says, oh, there we go.
Ah, perfect.
I wasn't being allowed to show my lovely face to everybody, but hi, I'm here now, so.
That's perfect. And Gareth, I was just going to say, as rules of the road, we'll be doing a really good job with timekeeping. And I think we may be popping up on a screen when there's like a 1 minute warning. So I apologize ahead of time for being the timekeeper, but excited to have Microbit Foundation again join us. And Gareth, looking forward to your presentation.
Brilliant, fantastic. And I hope my minute starts now rather than when I started talking. So.
No, exactly. We have a little bit of flexibility, so there you go.
Excellent. Okay, well, I will crack on. So yeah, as Anthony said, I'm Gareth Stockdale. I'm the CEO of the Microbit Educational Foundation. And, you know, thank you so much for having me here to speak today. I think in today's world, access to and understanding of technology is hugely influential on a person's life chances. But that technology can only be equitable if we diversify those that are shaping it. Nicole, can I have the next slide, please? Great. So the Microbit Educational Foundation is a not-for-profit formed in 2016. And we, as the foundation, believe that digital creativity and coding are foundational skills for the 21st century. Our mission is to provide an opportunity for all children to gain these foundational skills in technology. They might not all become coders or professional coders at that, but they will have a better understanding of technology and how it works, and will move from being digital consumers to digital creators. And in a post-COVID-19 world, technology will be even more important in our lives and to our work. Can I have the next slide, please, Nicole? Thank you. So I'd like to introduce you to Lynn. So Lynn is a middle school student who thought that technology was never for her. But having drawn inspiration from the Microbit and from our Do Your Bit Global Challenge, which is based around the Sustainable Development Goals, she created a technical solution to combat deforestation. And I'd just like to share an excerpt from what her teacher wrote to us after she found out that she won. Lynn has never really seen herself as someone who is good with technology. And I saw firsthand the hard work and positivity she displayed when things didn't work out. I hope it gives her the confidence to keep going. Lynn epitomizes what we're trying to achieve with the Microbit, inspiring more young people from more diverse backgrounds to create their best digital future. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. The project started in 2014 in the UK, and these were some of the sort of stats that we were responding to. I was the co-project lead in the BBC that started the project, and we were trying to work out how we could broaden participation in coding and digital creativity to try and give people those better sort of skills and opportunities to succeed. We brought together a partnership of 29 partners, including people like Microsoft and Samsung and ARM, and we created the Microbit. We distributed 800,000 of them to all Year 7 students across the UK, so that's 11 and 12-year-olds, along with software editors, learning resources and apps. The next slide, please. So what is a Microbit? So a Microbit is a handheld pocket-sized computer that bridges the gap between code that you see on screen and real-world solutions. It was designed in order for students to be able to produce solutions to problems that were important to them, or to follow their passions and their interests and create something that helped them to pursue them. It's an affordable, flexible device that allows you to have a very low floor and be able to do something really quickly, but also a really high ceiling so you can continue your digital journey with the Microbit. It stands out from from the crowd because it was designed for mainstream education. So it was designed for people like Lynn who thought that technology wasn't for them. It is also crucially designed for teachers. It's an education project rather than a technology project. But it isn't just hardware, it's a lot more than that. It's learning resources, building teacher capability, and software editors. Can I have the next one, please? And here is a Microbit. I'll really briefly just point out some of the major features. It's got a 5x5 LED matrix, which allows you to have a really sort of easy first experience with coding and have a successful one. But it's also got a compass and accelerometer. It senses light and temperature. It's got Bluetooth antenna and radio, so it allows you to program it from your phone, but also to do Microbit to Microbit communications. And it's also got an edge connector, which opens up a wonderful world of accessories. Next, please. And we don't work in isolation. As I said, the hardware is only one part of it, but we work with partners to reach as many teachers as we can around the world. That allows us to then reach more children. Can I have the next one, please? And the benefits of microbit. We've had lots of different research, and it's the ease of use, it's the tangibility, it's the physical getting hold of something and coding something which has a real world context. And there's opportunities for creativity and also problem solving and collaboration. But as I said, you can use a variety of different software editors, from Scratch to Make Code to our Python editor. And we've got loads of free resources and teaching materials on our website. We're also working with partners to provide teacher professional development and capacity building. And as I said, there's a whole bunch of accessories which you can then add to the microbit, from weather stations to climate action kits to drones to hovercraft through to games, electronics. It's really as accessible as possible for people to get started with. Can I have the next one, please? And what is the evidence of impact? Does it work? So from our independent research that we've done in multiple settings around the world, there are three key benefits to using the microbit. It makes young people feel like anyone can code. It makes tech more appealing to girls, and it builds teacher confidence, especially for those non-specialist teachers. And I've just had the 1 minute, so I'll move on to the last slide, if that's okay, Nicole. Fantastic. And Lynn, who we introduced you to earlier, is one of 25 million young people around the world who have learnt and benefited with learning digital skills with the microbit. The device is available to buy in over 65 countries, and we have large-scale programs, both nationally and regionally, in 30 of those. For example, in Croatia, where it started as a Kickstarter campaign with a local entrepreneur, which then led to the most successful Kickstarter campaign in the country's history, and the education ministry getting involved, and microbits being distributed to all schools across Croatia. And this has been achieved in just over 3 years from the start of the foundation. But this is just the beginning. We've currently reached those 25 million young people. And by 2025, we want to reach 100 million people learning digital skills with microbit. Thank you very much. It's been brilliant to come here and share the microbit with you, and any questions I will be welcome to answer.
So Gareth, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I really appreciated that. So just to kind of kick things off, in your presentation, you spoke about the gap between supply and demand with regards to coding knowledge and skills. And I'm wondering if you could expand a bit about how microbit approaches engagement, especially youth engagement, to get them excited about getting involved in coding.
So as I said, when the project started out in the BBC, what we were trying to do was make technology accessible for those that potentially didn't think that technology was for them. There's lots of solutions for those that are technically already orientated or happy to use technology. We wanted to create something which had multiple ways in and multiple ways to use. So that's where the microbit comes in. It's really sort of flexible. And as I said, you can use it to create solutions to problems that you are interested in. You know, with our global challenge, we had solutions for people trying to stop birds flying into windows, deforestation, you know, saving dolphins, you know, monitoring temperature in turtle nests. So you've got multiple ways in for people to use technology. And because it takes it away from the screen, it gives you those sort of ability to create those solutions. It broadens that participation, because it's not, there's a real end point to what you're doing. It's not just coding for coding's sake. Coding is a facilitator to solution creation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So I have a question from the chat about Africa and your product availability. It seems from this comment, Africa is really underrepresented in the product availability. What's your plan for remedying this in the future?
So at the moment, we are doing pilots in a number of different African settings to ensure that we understand the context and can create projects that will work. So we're currently doing a pilot in Gambia, in Tunisia, and also in South Africa. And we've also done some workshops in Malawi as well. So we'll be pulling the findings from those pilots together, and next year in 2021 we will be targeting more projects in Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa.
No, that's great. And just looking at the chat, you're probably not able to toggle since you're speaking, but there's lots of questions and comments about potential partnerships. Folks are looking to know if they're interested in partnering with Microbit, how would they go about that?
So you can contact us through our website. We've got a support at microbit.org, or I know that Rachel and Katie are both on this call, who head up our partnerships in EMEA and North America respectively, so reach out to those. Yeah, so they're the two main ways, and Rachel's just put her email address on the chat, so feel free to contact her. But yeah, we welcome all partners of whatever size and shape. We are trying, as I said in the presentation, the way that we reach scale is through those partnerships, so we'd really like to work with people.
And then I think we have 1 minute left. I'm going to slip in one last question about, since you mentioned scale, can you really briefly just talk about what kind of cost it is to go to scale? I mean, is there a cost comparative advantage if you're operating with more units, more learners, or what does that look like?
So, as the beauty of us being a not-for-profit is we are able to work with our suppliers to keep the cost of Microbit as low as possible. So, and through that scale, we've managed to do that more. So the Microbit itself can be bought retail at around about £15 or $16-ish. So, compared to other things that are out there commercially in the marketplace, it's way, way cheaper. And we also are able to donate to relevant projects around the world to help kickstart, projects. But as you said, the more scale that we achieve, the more accessible in terms of cost.
Right. Well, Gareth, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you for participants for their comments. We'll pass on other questions for Gareth to comment on after the event. Let me hand back to Tony to introduce us to our next presenter.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. Terrific. Lots of questions. Folks, based on previous webinars, will continue to ask these questions with you and your colleagues in the chat. And then thanks for putting in the various email addresses as well. I should also mention that Scott, who's going to be kind enough to help moderate the questions, is the mEducation's Alliance Director of Strategic Initiatives. So thank you, Scott, for working with our colleagues to grab those questions from the chat. Okay, so I'm so excited that Irene could join us for today's presentation. In fact, whatever event that we have related to supporting learners with disability, I feel that it's essential to have Irene and her colleagues from Enable join us. We were introduced a few years ago, just Irene, with the really important work that you're doing to support access to a variety of skills, including coding skills, particularly for learners or for youth that are blind. It's such an essential part of our message in terms of providing skills to digital literacy curriculum that we're reaching marginalized populations. You guys are doing amazing work. Take it away, Irene. Let people know about your amazing work, and then look forward to a lot of questions as well. So Irene, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tony. This is a very humbling opportunity to share what we are doing at Enable. So my name is Irene Barikirika, the founder and executive director of Enable. And, the founder and executive director of Enable. Enable is a nonprofit organization based in Nairobi, Kenya and Washington, DC. Next slide, please. With a very simple mission, and before I state our mission, Enable was founded after experiencing blind students who are using Braille. And Braille is a very important tool, but what was happening is that they were not having enough Braille books. Like 4 or more students could share a single Braille book. At the same time, there was a disconnection between when they graduate from high school, they graduated with Braille skills, joining a world that's oblivious to Braille. And at the same time, these students could not, we can't read Braille and they can't read print. So there was a clear disconnection. So Enable was formed with a very simple mission to empower the blind and visually impaired in Africa through computer-assisted technology. Next, please. And with that, we were able to get our friends in Atlanta to raise $3,400. And we established our first assistive technology computer lab at Thika Primary School for the Blind in Kenya with 100 students. First forward, since 2009, we are currently in 6 schools for the blind in Kenya. Kenya has 16 schools, so we still have a lot of room for growth. But at the same time, we've enrolled more than 8,000 students in our program. Next, please. And our goal is really to be able to scale our program across the schools for the blind in Kenya and other African nations, so that any student who's blind is able to access computer skills training, technology, but also be able to connect with the rest of the world independently. So I'll take this opportunity to sort of show you a short video about our program.
A primary school for the blind. One day I was walking home, a street child threw a stone at me for no reason. It hit my eye. I was rushed to the hospital, and several surgeries later, I became totally blind. It has been a rough journey, but as you can see, I'm doing everything you do in spite of my blindness. It took me a while to adjust to my new world, but soon enough, I got used to it. You can imagine my surprise. The first time, I was told that I was going to be taught how to use a computer in school. Out of all the things I thought I would be able to do, this was definitely not one of them. I was first taught how to locate letters on a keyboard, how many rows a keyboard has, and I had to develop a way of remembering each one of them. This was actually the most difficult part. From there, it has been an interesting journey. I'm learning new things every day. I can use most softwares on a computer, and most importantly, I can code using HTML to create websites. My advice to anyone with any challenges in life, always be courageous and consistent in whatever you do. If I can do it, so can you.
So, thank you. Yeah. So thank you so much. That's Nancy. We have about 120 students who participate in the coding program. Some of you may wonder how we actually do this. What we do is we partner with schools for the blind. We set up assistive technology computer labs. We come with a full ecosystem. The students, we bring in the hardware, the software, and the instructors. So the students go through basic computer skills training before they get into HTML coding or JavaScript. So next, because time is not on our side, I'm going to proudly introduce one of our beneficiaries, and his name is John Brown, to just share briefly about his experience on the program and what he plans to do. Welcome, John Brown.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is John Brown. I am a student at Kenyatta University, pursuing special needs education. I'm in my final year, I'm in 4th year. I met Enable when I was in grade 6. I was about 14 years at that time. The first time I never had any previous computer experience. So I was very excited to learn computers, how they work, and what I could do with them. When I was in grade 6, I started with basic computer skills, just computer proficiency, typing skills, internet and email. And just when I was about to graduate from primary school, I was introduced to coding. I started with HTML, creating simple websites. And when I came to high school, I also continued learning coding. I went to learn CSS and Java, a little bit of JavaScript. And I'm very happy because when I went to campus, I really worked on my skills, creating websites with friends here and there. When we have an idea, we put it online, and I would earn money once in a while when let's say, for example, someone has an idea, we put it online for them. I also learned hardware skills where I could fix a little hitches here and there when my friends actually here at the campus, I really get an upper hand when, let's say, for example, working on assignments, doing research, all this I learned at Enable. I'm very happy. I also code. I have a blog I'm developing about health, just sharing information to my friends who have disabilities and how they can take care of their health right now when we are in this lockdown period. I'm very happy, and I would really like to appreciate Enable for what they've done in my life, because without Enable, I don't think I will be right here. I will be where I am right now. Thank you so much.
Irene and John, thank you so much. Your time is up for the presentation. We're going to move into the question portion, if that's all right with you.
Irene, thank you so much for the presentation, and John, thank you for sharing your personal experience. I think that's wonderful. So Irene, in your presentation, you mentioned that when participants in your program have gained some coding skills, which is just wonderful. Can you sort of explain what do some of these folks, the students, move on to doing after they pass through your program? What are they doing, or what are they aspiring to do for those maybe who are in the program right now?
Okay, that's a great question. So I have to say this, disability in terms of, especially when it comes to children in university and technology, the whole concept is very new in Africa. And we do have the students who learn how to code like John Brown and all that, but what happens is they rarely find employment, so they don't get anywhere. So in the meantime, what Enable has done as a continuation of our program, we've actually designed a program that can take on students like John Brown and other students within the program that have actually some amazing coding skills and want to explore further. And we are going to train them to be the next generation of blind and low vision developers or software engineers. So we actually have a program in place. We have an ongoing pilot project with 10 solid students, and some of them are learning JavaScript. So that's what we are doing. And the whole goal is to be able to show the world that actually, you know what, this is possible in Africa as well. So, and that's part of what you learn when it comes to employment. Sometimes employers want to see, how can I handle a blind person, or what can a blind person do? So I think that Enable is trying to create that example as well.
No, that's great. So here's a question from the chat. Irene, considering the fact that Enable is the one providing hardware, what's the status on possibly giving Braille computer keyboards or other assisted technologies? I think you mentioned a little bit about that in your previous response, but maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, so for our existing programs, the one thing we learned is that if you go to a school for the blind or any special school for children with disabilities in Africa, and you start telling them about all this technology, if they cannot afford to buy their own Braille books, there's no way they're going to afford to buy hardware. So that's why we try to come in, when we come in to do a project, we try to bring in the full ecosystem, whether it's the hardware, the software, and everything. But what we do is we look for donors who give us the hardware and cater for the continuous training of the students. But we also try and use open source applications, like for screen reader, we normally use NVDA. And the reason for that is so that when this student is out in the world with their parents or they go to a cyber cafe, they can easily just download a software application that's free and be able to use whatever devices they find out there. The other thing we do is we avoid brailing keyboards. That's just standard procedure in our program. The reason is because we found that if you braille them, the kids become so dependent on the braille on the keyboard. So we teach them without braille. And that helps them when they're out in the world. They can take on your laptop anytime and use it without having to think, oh my God, this keyboard is not properly brailled for me. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for that. A lot of comments here. A lot of folks want to reach out to partner with you. So I'll let you guys exchange in the chat, share contact information. Let me hand back to Tony to introduce our next presenter. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. And I know, just in the interest of time, we're not doing justice to any of your presentations, literally. And so appreciate Gareth and then Irene sticking to time. I mean, our ambition for these events are really to open a door to fabulous groups that are working in this space, and then hope that it'll lead to further contact. So we will be making the presentations available afterwards, including that really moving video. So thank you, Irene. I've also just dropped into the chat 2 associated references to universal design and ICT, if folks are interested. And if there's additional questions, please continue just to add those to the chat box. And Irene, you and your colleagues could answer those as we go along. So thank you for your colleagues joining us. All right, so we're gonna, thanks again, Irene. All right, we're gonna move on to the International Education Association with Eliane Metni, who's the president and director. And again, simply delighted to have you join us, Eliane, for last year's mEducation Alliance Symposium. So for a number of these presenters, they were so good that we just wanted to have folks come back and to take advantage of a virtual audience. So turning it over to you.
Thank you for inviting me, Anthony. It's wonderful to be back. Okay, before starting talking about the program, let me say who we are and what we do. Could you go on to the next slide? Thank you. So we're a nonprofit with 20 years of work in education at the intersection of society, technology, and learning, with computational thinking really embedded in a holistic pedagogy based on human, social, and ecological values. I think those are at the heart of what makes our project so special and our learning so relevant to students, because they work on real-life projects that enable them to make meaning and acquire competences needed for the world of work. And so the coding skills they learn are really put to work in something that, in projects that help them become and be part of society. Next. And where we work is, you look at all these circles, to end with community, we start and we work at the system level. We work with ministries of education in order to scale and reach out. And we train coaches, trainers, but also work in order to work in schools. So schools and in our educational institutions alongside universities that support us. And we work with youth and children. And these projects are all brought into community work that extend what they learn in school after school. This bridges the in and out of school and help them make meaning of what they're doing. I'll explain this in later when I start with the examples. But let me tell you a little bit about our summer program. If we can go to the next slide. Everybody speaks about COVID and the problem of COVID and what we're going to be doing. And I think you need to know that the context in Lebanon is really beyond that, into a big problem that we've been living since October. So we've lived social and economic issues that have taken their toll on education. And we committed to our mission, and we wanted the summer to be special for all the students. So we converted our face-to-face program into an online program, so they can all participate in it from their home, and it's all free. And we call those short 3-week sprints, so they can engage, but then go to the next level and apply their skills. And the beauty of it is when they finish these sprints, they can go back, they can continue what they've learned in school. The next, if you can go to the next slide. What we also made special for summer and in our online courses is we've gamified the experience. They can have fun between units, and it motivates them to go between exercises. Because if students are 6 to 18 to 16, they're very young to be online. And so the experience is fun. And next slide. And also it's rewarding. And the reward system is beautiful because it's tiered with a badging system to pursue achievements which they can upgrade and motivate them to do more. And this helps them to sustain their motivation and continue between within the courses and beyond. Go to the next slide. In addition to being online, the courses are very much focused on community building, which is supported by, reinforced by webinars, and the volunteers bring them into special sessions and support them across the courses. So here we have 2 courses that started, and in the next sprint there'll be continuation to these courses in addition to new courses. In total, we're aiming to have 500 students at the end, doing community outreach also online, which is fun and engaging with what we would like to have is a competition. If you can go to the next one. The pathways are exciting for them because rather than just take one course and then end and then you continue within just coding, then you can take coding, making, Internet of Things, depending on your level, and follow a track. And those tracks are exciting for them because they can gain diverse skills and acquire multidisciplinary skills that they can put to depending on what they like, but they can put them to practice into the project they design and select. We can go to the next. Okay, so far as an organization, what we've achieved is we've worked with over 1,000 students through teachers, but also through our summer camps, and we've reached out to 86 schools. In total, we've done approximately 587 training sessions, and we've done that exactly with 33 volunteers. And so that power force, if you can go to the next slide, they're wonderful, and they've been with us for now almost 5 years. So we've seen that all university students from the engineering departments, and they already have jobs. Some of them are mentors in their jobs and still support the program. Can we go to the next slide? I'm going to give you an example because then when you look at the example of what we've done within schools, so we've spoken about the summer program, but because we link in and out of school, the school program is also important, and students can continue their project with their teachers. And here you can have an example of the Digital Learning Innovation Program, which I presented in December in DC in October. And that was awarded one of the deepest impact project amongst 44 international projects that were run over 2 years by the IDRC, the International Research and Development in Canada, because it impacted so deeply students learning, but also teachers. And that is amazing because you can see that the 41 schools sustained and those students continued, and the students that we've reached have continued their summer program. And they've all presented their project at the Ministry of Education. Next. Could you go to the next slide? Okay, so that project, just the one before. So when you, the girl you see right there with the glasses is called Aisha. And that girl has a visual impairment. And the project the students decided, so here you've got 3 girls and 3 boys. The other one is not showing there, is behind. They've decided to help Aisha address her impairment. Why? Because she was ridiculed by other students when she bumped into them or when she bumped into things. And they've used the Raspberry Pi, and they've coded the Pi alongside electronics to be able to detect what's around her, which tells her and beeps and beeps her and gives her signals to stop before she bumps. And that changed her life, but it also changed the life of the students. The student you see at the back here was a student who was expelled from, who was going to be expelled. Okay.
Hey, Lynn, I'm sorry, I think we're at time. So sorry, once you finish your last point, and then we can move on to questions.
Okay, so there was a very short 30 seconds video that I would like to show before we end that gives you an example of the project.
Leon, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm going to echo what Tony said a moment ago. So many great presentations, but so little time. So we are fighting the clock. So in your presentation, you mentioned that to advance your mission of creative learning with code, you talk about the driving force of your volunteer corps. I'd be curious to hear more from you about the impact of having that peer-to-peer mentoring component, and what those youth volunteers, what the impact is in supporting students in this case.
You want to know more about the volunteering program?
Yeah, that'd be interesting, yeah.
Yeah. When we started doing the program, we were wondering how we could reach out to all regions in Lebanon. And we decided that it made sense to use volunteering, because as a small group, you would have limits to be physically in one place, and transportation is expensive. Plus, going from one place to the other limits you. And we partnered with universities and recruited a large number of volunteers, and we trained them. And 33 were retained. So some kept and changed over the 5 years. Those remain and became part of the core program. So they support technically. And mentor the students through their projects. So we train teachers in the design, in the pedagogy, and they do everything that's technical. And so there's a complementarity in the training, and they've become part of the program. And something beautiful that we've added when we were doing face-to-face, so there's face-to-face and online, is that we have something called working session, which is absolutely free for all students to come within their region. So if you're in a school in the Bekaa, instead of going to Beirut, you can stay there, and the volunteers from that region will support students during their project work. And that accelerates the learning and empowers the student to do more. And it created a beautiful community of volunteers and a sense of purpose to the mission, which is to sustain and grow and reach out to everyone, and which is now in the online courses.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's a powerful example of how youth empowerment can really impact learning in this case. Pulling from the chat, there's a question here about, is Arduino being used for the prototypes?
Is the Arduino used for coding in our program?
For the prototypes, the initial.
They could if they want to. They're free to use the software, the tool they want, but we've started using, our courses are designed around the Raspberry Pi for X number of reasons. And one is that it can also be used as a computer, as a standalone device. And in some of the regions, they've used it all the way to learn. And it is sturdy, so it has passed. We've used it with refugees in camps. We've used it in many areas. It's a very sturdy product. And it also is very light and enables them to learn and add to that. And so it's not limited to the Pi, but it started with the Pi. And so some of them have used Arduino, and we allow them to use any tool they want.
That's great, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And then I just also will point out that there's lots of requests to have your contact details. So like all of our presenters, I think there's a lot of interest. So please connect in the chat. And let me pass back to Tony to introduce our final presentation.
And I realize we should be applauding or use our little emoticons. So thanks so much and for the great presentation, and know that you'll have lots of follow-up. All right,
Thank
so to
you.
round out, pleasure, thanks for joining us. Love the background as well, I love the red background. So for our last presentation, we're delighted to have Tina Appiah, who's the founder and CEO of Ghana Code Club. Again, Tina, we were thrilled to have you as part of Symposium last year, and delighted that through this virtual forum that we have a greater opportunity to share your good works with the audience. So please take it away.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much for having me again. Yeah, so I'm Ernestina Appiah, the founder of Ghana Code Club. Ghana Code Club is a national after-school initiative that focuses teaching the youth fundamentals of computer programming. We've been existing since 2015. We believe that digital skills and other technical skills are tools of empowerment. That is why we are on a mission. Please, the slides, please. The mission slide. That's why we are on a mission, ensuring that every child is not left out, that we aim to put code clubs in all communities in Ghana. What we do, our coding centers are run by volunteers and teachers who guide children to use fun and creative learning materials, to create animations, mobile apps, websites, and games using Scratch, HTML, CSS, and Python. Currently, we have over 130 active code clubs running across the country, from schools, libraries, community centers. We also train teachers. To gain confidence in teaching the new computing curriculum that has been introduced by government. We have so far reached about 50,000 kids since we started. Through the help of government agencies, Google, Africa Code Week, and many organizations, we were able to train 600 teachers in 2019. And the teachers have given us reports, 200 of the teachers have given us reports that they have reached over 240 kids on the average. Ghana Code Club also participates in other digital initiatives like Girls in ICT Day, Africa Code Week, and Hour of Code, where we use the opportunity to exposing more kids into the world of computer programming. Our learning resources are mostly from our partners from code.org and Code Club UK or Raspberry Pi. We use their curriculum because, one, their computational thinking concepts and project guidelines are easy to follow. We also use their curriculum because they already have existing projects that helps us cut down on costs to focus on the main goal, which is forming strategic partnerships in creating more digital centers and introducing more children and teachers. They also help us to keep up with EdTech trends. Aside using the international partners curriculum, part of the team have also come out with projects that enable us to teach machine learning and AI to teach some of the kids with. Yeah, it's a moment. Now, among the COVID crisis, before the COVID crisis started, we had printed books. That is from, we received micro funding, and then we printed books, putting our projects and some of the challenges there for the trained teachers to use. Unfortunately, most of the books are still here because the teachers are also locked down. Anyway, during this pandemic, a few teachers are also using the opportunity to train further as they have access to some few students to teach online. This, however, is not effective because 98% of the students that are in Ghana in a code club do not have access to computers or internet. And so it is worrying for us at the moment. Meanwhile, we are still continuing to build. We want to build sustainable digital skills in schools, and so we need help from other people to donate so that we establish centers for children. Thank you. And sorry, I just received this. Thank you so much.
Ernestina, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I can really see how what you're doing can support what's happening in the classroom and outside the classroom. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, you're having the clubs and every community as an aspirational goal in Ghana, and you've had a lot of young people come through and be empowered by what you're doing. Could you talk a little bit more about what the impact these coding clubs have had on youth, and what are some of their aspirations for the future? Or maybe if you have some examples of what folks who've come through the clubs, what they're doing with their coding skills, that would be great.
Okay, so the impact, our main goal is to incite in children to develop some kind of interest in digital making or in technology. The impact is great because most children, parents report that their kids cannot even get up when they are trying to create something. So that is a great impact there. Most of the seniors also now are studying courses like engineering in the universities and computer science. So I'll say the impact there is great as well. And then the next question is, our future plans is to partner with as many organizations as possible to have centers in every community. We already started. Samsung has come on board, and American Towers Company, because we realize that here in our part of the world, we lack the resources. So we go to them to plead with them to establish these centers that will have our facilitators there teaching children. So that's the future plans.
No, that's great and super interesting. And just so you know, I'll be reaching out. I have a lot of Ghanaian colleagues who I think would be really interested to hear about what you're doing if they haven't heard already. So thank you so much. Let me pass back to Tony.
All right, Tina, again, outstanding. Tina, I'm just going to take advantage because you actually were great for time. So I'll give you another question as well. What's an immediate wish list item that you have for the work that you're doing, just to accelerate?
Yes. So as I said, we are building centers because there are so many children that are stuck home now doing nothing because of the COVID crisis, for instance. It's just a few of them that have access to internet or anything to learn with. And so we are encouraging people to donate computers and other materials to us. So we go to a community, set up a learning center. So that is our immediate need at the moment. And then we can be interacting with them online.
Okay, Tina, and I know that, again, we'll be providing your presentation to folks afterwards. Tina, for all the presenters, if you'd like to put your email in the chat for folks, it looks like there's a number of questions for you, Tina, just based on your presentation. Okay. And again, want to thank, what about a big round of applause or whatever format one would like to use to give our appreciation to the presenters, for the 4 presenters. We're exactly on time. And again, want to thank, again, it doesn't do justice to the amazing work of these institutions. If we can provide any sort of additional background information about these institutions or put you in touch with them, if you have difficulties, please let us know. But again, want to thank all 4 of our presenters for their first hour. So Gareth, Irene, Eliana, and Ernestina, please take a bow and thank you. Pleasure. All right, we're exactly at the hour. Before we transition to the next roundtable, we'll just take a brief break, for 3 minutes. That's what we'll do. I have it 11:30 here, but just if people need to do a stretch break, we can help lead people through the gymnastics or whatever else, or if you need to get some water or take a breather, we'll start in just 3 or 5 minutes. I do want to invite then our roundtable participants. What we'll do is basically have an extended dialogue with them, just to be prepared for us to start in 2 or 3 minutes. So take a brief break, use the chat. We'll be back in just 2 or 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, well, we're going to get started again. Can you guys hear me okay? Wave hands. God, I can see you. Excellent. I hope folks were able to get a drink of water or do a stretch break as well. So the second hour of this Coding Global event, we were really clever. We said we have so many great organizations that we would like to talk about their amazing initiatives and projects. There's not enough time for us to be able to do that in 2 hours. So we said to ourselves, why don't we organize the second hour as a roundtable discussion? So our individuals could tell us about their great organizations, and assuming if there's interest, people will follow up with them, but also as an opportunity for just to have a greater dialogue about issues related to Coding Global. I will say, advertise in advance that we will organize another event, however, that does provide more justice to the organizations that are presenting in this roundtable. So you will have more of an opportunity to hear about their specific programs, but hoping that they, of course, could weave it into their presentations. We are delighted. I'm just going to introduce the folks that will be joining us, maybe with the wave of the hand, or to confirm that you're on board. Kyle with the Cisco Foundation, are you on board? I'm assuming
I am. It's great to meet everyone. I've been unmuted, So
okay, that's
great
perfect.
to meet everyone.
All right, wait. Well, maybe what I'll just do is I'll do the introductions and we'll unmute all the presenters together. Thanks, Kyle, for joining us from Cisco Foundation. Love the work and the collaboration with Cisco that USAID and a number of institutions have had for so many years. So thanks for joining us, Kyle. No event on Coding Global would be complete without having representatives from code.org. So we're delighted that Leo, you're joining us as the VP of International Partnerships. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Leo, and for the great work that your institution has done for so many years. We have John Matogo, who's joining us from IBM. John, again, a pleasure to have so many deep opportunities for collaboration with IBM. Looking forward to hearing about your great works, particularly from your role and capacity as an African leader in East Africa.
Thank you, Tony.
Perfect. Scott Osterwheel, Creative Director from MIT Education Arcade. Great work that comes from your shop, Scott, and so looking forward to your contributions to the event as well. Thanks so much.
Pleasure to be here.
Great. Raspberry Pi Foundation, we have James Aslett from International Program Manager. James, you had some shout outs to Raspberry Pi in the earlier session. Those were not planted, but perfect that you're able to join in the roundtable discussion. So thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here too.
Terrific. And then with two projects that are engaged with the Youth Mobile Initiative and Africa Code Week, we have Sunil Jeunesse from SAP. Sunil, are you in South Africa right now? Is that where you're calling in from?
Right now in South Africa, where we just came out of a major power outage. So I was battling to stay in the mix for the last hour or so, but we pulled through.
Perfect timing. Well, thanks, Sunil, for joining us. We're really excited to hear about your work. And finally, Davide Storti with UNESCO, who is the founder of the UNESCO Youth Mobile Project. Davide, can you hear us okay? Hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me too?
That's perfect. All right, great. Well, terrific that we're all on board, and we'll just thank the digital gods so far that things are going well. And with the caveat that if things don't go well, we'll just bear with it and with a sense of humility, especially when any topic that you have related to digital, you invariably never know what kind of gremlins may appear. So maybe to begin with, again, in the spirit of that it's basically an opportunity for folks to hear about great programs that are going on globally, and not being able to do justice to all your initiatives, I did want to, what we'll do is I'll start with some questions related that we've sent ahead of time, and then would invite the roundtable discussions to weave in sort of the first minute or so about their institution's work in this space so that we can truly turn it into a roundtable discussion. I would also invite folks, if you'd like to put questions in the chat, that's terrific. Scott and I will be co-facilitating some of the questions with our roundtable participants. But as with our first hour, I'm sure roundtable participants will be delighted to follow up with you. So maybe to begin with, I wanted to address this first question. John, I'm going to address this to you. One of our colleagues, maybe Suni, and then James. This first question is, what do you see as the relevance of code training during COVID-19? And again, feel free to tell us a little bit about your institutions. And let's just start with that. If John, Suni, and James, let's maybe start with John.
All right. Well, thank you, Tony, first of all, for a chance to join this session. I really enjoyed the previous hour listening to all the different initiatives folks were working on. So just by way of background, so I run the skills initiatives for IBM in East Africa region. And what we are focusing on is on new and emerging technologies. And we see coding as a critical component in this skill set that we are developing. One thing that we realize, just to go to your question, during this COVID-19 period, we see that technology has really enabled anything that is moving at the moment, right? And a lot of the solution that we see coming out and the innovation that are making impact in trying to address challenges that different people are facing, be it in education or in business. These are solutions that are primarily developed using technology, and this is why we see skills around coding, and will be extremely essential going forward. We also see a lot of disruption in terms of the workplace. When we look at the rebound, the new skill that the opportunity that will be arising from this situation, I think, will be heavily underpinned by technology, and this is why we see that skills like coding would be extremely important.
Thanks, John. And do you want to, John, for 1 minute, sort of talk about some of the initiatives that IBM's involved with?
Yeah, so I mean, we have tons of initiatives when you look at IBM globally. Allow me just to focus on a few, especially in the region that I'm working. So I'm based in Nairobi and focusing on East Africa. So, we've got programs that are looking at skills development. We've got programs that are looking at skills development from IBM as giving volunteer time in working with young people or anyone who's interested in that. We've got hackathons. We've got content that we've created for coding skills development. Two that I'll just sort of focus on right now, especially during this COVID-19 time. We have one initiative called Call for Code, which is a global challenge, the largest of its kind, where we are inviting innovators to really use technology to put out solutions that can address the biggest challenges that we face in the world right now. So for this year, the Call for Code is themed around COVID-19 and climate change. So we're making this opportunity available for anyone who wants to sees the technology can be used to address some of the challenges that COVID-19 has brought, for example. We give them the platform, so we make IBM Cloud available for them to use. And then, we obviously have some prize money incentive that they can make use of to try and innovate around that. So this is one example of one challenge that I'd like to share. Another one, and this primarily just to tie into the previous conversation, when you look at people who are looking at trying to learn coding and also trying to really put their skills to work, we have a program called Digital Nation Africa, which is a learning and innovation program that we are rolling out, free for people on the African continent, that is really focused at developing skills in this area. So you sign up on this website, you can learn various technology skills, coding being one of them. You can go in there very early on and begin developing your skills going forward. And then again, we give you an IBM Cloud account. If you're looking at developing solutions that are based using AI, previous speakers talked about Internet of Things. So, you can really begin learning and actually putting your skills to test using this technologies. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, John. Maybe to round out this question before turning it over to Scott for the next question. And John, we've put in the chat links to those two initiatives you spoke about. For those that are also joining us, if you do at some point you go to the web page and you click on the headshot, you can also see a description of bio of our roundtable participants, including some of the activities that they're referencing. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. So Neil, what's your response to that question about relevance in regards to in light of COVID-19 with coding?
Thanks very much, Tony. I think that if we have to look at the context of the globe at the moment, never before has coding been more relevant. Not only the impact of the applications that are developed, but just the thinking process that we can instill in young people. And I'm glad to see Scott on this webinar as well. SAP has been involved to a large extent in driving the Africa Code Week program on the continent, which some may argue or disagree with me, is the largest digital literacy program by numbers of people that have gone through the program over the last sort of 5 years, now in its 6th year. Now, the whole idea behind coding, as we know, is not to create programmers out there. What we want to do is unleash, Scott, as you remember, one of the co-founders of Scratch wrote this book which spoke about the kindergarten. And he says, coding is about teaching creativity, because by being human, we are defined by the ability to be creative. And I think in COVID times, if you look at what has happened around us and how global economies have crashed, how the way that we work has crashed, and how by our admission, even SAP in its recent announcements, made some announcements about its performance in the last sort of 3 to 4 months. It's quite positive. The technology companies seem to be, standing the test of COVID. On Africa Code Week, I should take some time to mention that we have some of our brilliant partners like Siafunda Community Technology Centers. I see Smiley's on this call. We have UNESCO, Youth Mobile, well represented by Davide Storti, who you'll hear from later on. Some of my colleagues are on this call, some of the other partners. And just reflecting on the last year, the program has been to some 37 countries across Africa, reaching more than 3.8 million children and youth. 39,000 teachers were trained in coding and coding capabilities and computational thinking. And of that, more than 45% were young women and girls. And if you look, even if you look at our panel, it's a male-dominated panel. This should change in the future. Tony, please don't feel upset by this comment. I'd like to see more women on panels of this nature in the future. And we are instilling in a very aggressive manner the direction of egalitarianship in terms of gender. If Africa wants to transcend and become the future of the globe, as everyone calls it, with its youngest population into the next 20, 30, 60 years, women have got to be at the forefront of this coding because they bring a lot more creativity than us. We are often accused of not being able to multitask. We're accused of many, many things that keep us blinkered in some of the ways that we operate. And by getting women more involved into that, I think we have a brilliant platform. I should then just pause and make one small remark before I hand over to the next speaker and give them ample time as well. COVID-19, the pandemic has really impacted the way that we're looking at the program. But as I said at the beginning, coding is about developing creativity. And we've got a wonderful team. I sit on the Global Steering Committee of the Africa Code Week. We've got a wonderful team that has worked magically in the background. This year, we're actually extending the program to 54 countries, from 37 to 54. We often say to our salespeople, buy a Lamborghini when you are not selling. And what is this all about? In times of difficulty, that is when you need to step up to the plate, and that is when you need to expand. That's when you need to become, frontier leaders and be at the front of the pack. So going to 54 countries, utilizing to a large extent virtual capabilities with organizations on the ground, and extending that also with the development of an open source application where all kinds of materials over the last 5 to 6 years will be placed for the use of teachers, for schools and governments. Remember, we're working very integrally with the 54 education departments, national departments across the continent. And then to instill finally, and I should touch on IBM because John may get upset with me, to instill also earlier this year, we were involved together with UNESCO, with this Code the Curve program, John, which you'd have seen some attention given to that. That was a precursor of where we are now. We're going to host an African code. African, capital letter CAN code challenge, which will be launched effectively and take place in the month of October, or as is allowable within Africa. And out of that, we're hoping not only to develop and increase the use of MIT Scratch, but also to utilize Python, and be able to get the next generation of coders up and running. And maybe I should pause at that point and open it up further. Thank you.
Great. Sunil, thanks so much. And the resources, but also acknowledging in terms of representation of making sure that we have thought leaders, that it provides sort of a fair representation of gender, marginalized populations, others that are doing great work in this space as well. So duly noted. Sunil, I know we'll have an opportunity to hear from Davide later on, but really excited to hear about the great work that you guys are supporting for Africa Code Week. Hey, James, how would you respond to that question in regards to the relevance of coding skills in light of COVID-19?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for inviting me. And it's, I was really excited to see the presentations in the first hour, and yeah, particularly one of our partners, Ernestina, with Code Club Ghana. So yeah, really pleased to be here. Looks like I'm joining you from a cupboard here in London, so I thought I'd keep the background authentic. So yeah, to give you a quick bit of background to the Raspberry Pi Foundation, we're a non-profit based in the UK with a global mission to put the power of computing and digital making into the hands of people all over the world. We do a range of programs. Hi, Ernestina. The first strand of work we do is around engaging millions of young people in learning computing and digital making through clubs and events. So we run and sustain Code Club, as you heard about in the first hour, Coder Dojo. We support thousands of educators and volunteers to engage in safe learning environments. We partner with organisations, local governments and educational institutions to adapt the Code Club model and the Coder Dojo model to fit local needs. It's what we've been doing with Code Club Ghana. We also run events like, I'm just going to turn my video off because it looks like it's affecting my my connection a little bit. Yeah, we run events like Coolest Projects, and we hosted Scratch Europe last year to give young people a platform to showcase their work. We also do a lot of research. We create curriculum, classroom resources in England and Wales for all schools. We train teachers, and we're, last but not least, we create the Raspberry Pi computer and the software that goes with it. So my answer to that question is a little bit different from the others because we're focused more on non-formal educational work here. So I interpreted this question a little bit differently, but I'm sure, well, I hope it'll be useful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact that COVID's had on our work and how we're going to reflect and learn on some of the interventions that we've had to adapt to during COVID. But I think it should be quite useful. The first point I wanted to make was around how the need for our work, the need for learning about digital technology and computing hasn't changed just because of COVID. It's in some cases made it more urgent. We've had to adapt and shift a lot of our work during lockdown to enable those at home to continue learning about computing and digital making. And that's inevitably led to a lot of remote and virtual educational delivery. And what we found and what's interesting and what we'll learn from and take during this COVID, the COVID situation is that actually remote and digital and virtual delivery that we've never done before has added value to the learning experience. A lot of the time, so a few examples there. We ran an online version of our Coolest Projects event, which some of you might have heard of. It's like a huge science and technology fair where lots of young people bring projects they've created within code clubs and Coder Dojos and Raspberry Jams around the world. And to give them a platform to talk about and share those projects. We had an online version, and that allowed young people from Palestine, Iraq and Syria who wouldn't be able to be at the physical event to participate. We've seen another couple of examples. We've had guest speakers and role models from private sector join code clubs, non-formal code clubs, and talk about their experiences into their employment, and that's something, in a face-to-face setting we'd never be able to facilitate. And yeah, there's a couple of opportunities like that this shift to virtual and online learning has taught us about how we can add value to the learning experience, and something that I think it's really important to reflect on after COVID, or into what the new normal might be, that will maybe bring these new ways of teaching into our core offering. And the second point I wanted to make that we found is that it's really highlighted and hopefully will give a bit more urgency to the lack of hardware and resources available in low resource settings. We've had a number of members of our community, examples in Romania and Malawi recently, where volunteers have been repurposing hardware from tech companies and repurposing and redelivering it to communities that have found, particularly in places where young people only had access to computers at school and now they're at home without access. These are really like community-driven interventions, and I really hope that will lead the way to more large-scale interventions by policymakers and governments to equip, more schools with hardware. And then, what leads to that is it's not just about hardware and and access to devices, that we need good, motivated, passionate, knowledgeable people on the ground in organizations like Code Club Ghana to take that hardware and train and support local educators and volunteers to take it and bring it to life. So yeah, that was just a couple of instances I wanted to share that, how our work's been impacted and what we'll be reflecting and learning on afterwards.
Thank you, James. Really appreciate that thoughtful response. Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next round of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And I want to pull from our presentations earlier in the first hour, and then some threads of this conversation, which I think are really important to focus on. And the next question is embedded in that theme. But the question is, how can we further expand outreach with coding efforts specifically, to reach more youth in developing countries, and perhaps reaching youth with youth, thinking about that peer youth mechanism, and then thinking about those areas of youth engagement with regards to entrepreneurship and economic development, and specifically coding as it pertains to the low resource setting that we've been talking about. So I'm first going to ask Leo from code.org to respond to that question about youth engagement and how we can further outreach with youth in developing countries.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. Before answering your question, I would probably want to emphasize that the best way to reach broad youth is to make sure that computer science is being taught in the formal education systems. That's the best way to have a very, very broad reach. And we're a long ways to achieving that. There's a lot of movement around the world to do that. Once you are in the school system, then it's very easy to start taking advantage or highlighting the great work that the students will start doing in their classes through their projects. And there's a lot of these that can happen also in an adult school setting through the different coding clubs, to initiatives by many of the organizations here represented. But it's never as broad-reaching as when you have thousands, and in this case, globally millions of students learning coding in the classroom. When you see a lot of examples of projects to do things like address societal problems, starting social enterprises, and also more important, for the students themselves to serve as role models and as mentors to other students. And I think that's perhaps the way in which we can better engage young people. Like, young people like to see role models that they can relate to. And the best way to do that is to see other young people doing what is possible and showing them what is possible for them to explore. So I think that tapping into the pool of students that are already learning, highlighting the great ideas, the great work, and you can see that everywhere in any country. You just have a group of students doing learning computational thinking, doing projects, and they immediately gravitate towards, yes, they do games and they do a few other things, but it's interesting how they always gravitate towards using what they are learning to addressing some of their local problems, the problems of their context, of their reality. And when you have those types of examples, then those students can serve as role models. And I think that's probably the best way to engage them.
No, and I would agree. I think that's a solid approach. And so at code.org, what are some of the strategic initiatives that fall into that space and sector? Where are you guys putting your energies in the present and the future?
Well, we primarily generate lots of content. So a first big step of what we do is just to localize what we have so that more people in the world can have access to our curriculum. Second, deep engagement where possible with education authorities so that we can advance jointly with a coalition of many different players, again, many of you here in this call, to make sure that the education systems are adopting coding curriculum, or computer science, actually, I would say, in a more broad sense. And then we have a network of partners throughout the world who do a lot of on-the-ground implementation. And those partners are the ones who then are in charge of highlighting these great success stories, human interest stories, stories of young people that have learned and are doing interesting things in their community. So I know I'm giving a very broad answer, but we just replicate that in many countries with a lot of different players. It's not the work of just a single organization, but it's what we do with Microbit and with Cisco here and with Africa Code and EU Code Week and many others.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's strength in collaboration, and we're all in this together, looking to reinforce our efforts collectively. Thanks, Leo. Let me turn that same question over to Scott from MIT, again, about expanding our outreach and efforts to, via coding, look at youth in developing countries. What does that look like to you, Scott?
Well, it's a great question and a hard question, I think. First of all, I guess I'll say what MIT has done for a long time, which is we're very committed to making our resources open. So much of our courseware is online, I think, already. I think because of COVID and the fact that the next semester is going to be taught almost entirely online, I expect that a lot of those courses are going to in some form be open, if not at the same time, but in some way later be made open to the whole world. And of course, a number of people have mentioned Scratch. Scratch is one of a number of programming languages that we make freely available. Scratch is probably the best beginning language. My own lab, the Education Arcade, does sort of more advanced programming around 3D modeling and also around doing location-based games and apps. And we also, our colleagues at MIT do App Inventor, which makes it possible to create game for phones. I will say, based on my own experience doing some work in India, one of the things that became clear to me from a project we worked on is that it's problematic if we focus too much on computation on desktop machines, on sort of expensive technology. I was really heartened to see the work being done with Raspberry Pi and Microbit. I do think that much of the work that's going to happen in the future is going to be combinations of small, cheap devices and phones. I think that's going to be where it happens. And I just want to emphasize what, I mean, much of what we believe in was really instantiated in the presentations in the first session about the value of coding, not as simply vocational. It's not about training. It's really about computational thinking, about understanding data, about understanding systems. And we see that in a lot of those programs. I think, so, but to get back to the question, I think it is very much about understanding where kids are. I think there's not a global answer to that question. I think we need to, country by country and location by location, understand where kids are. I know a lot of our work is built around gaming because I think that's something that kids seem to naturally gravitate toward. And so I think when we think about developing new talents in kids, we need to build on the talents they've already got. That's a very broad brush answer to a question that really needs very specific applications in different places, but broadly speaking, I think that's the answer.
Creative learning with code. No, I completely agree. And I think that's a core theme that I think carries throughout this discussion and the presentations we've seen. It's not purely code for producing programmers, but what can we do to be more than just the sum of the parts? And creative learning is definitely a vehicle. And as we saw in the microbits presentation, for example, there was definitely this notion that there's a supply and demand mismatch, you know, if we want to talk about it purely in economic terms. So, you know, in terms of a developing country context, I think for youth who are looking at opportunities, there's definitely a lot to be said there. And then obviously also as well, I want to echo something that Sunil had said earlier with regards to getting young women and girls involved in the tech sector. I think that's something that unfortunately that equity balance is not what we would hope it to be. And so that's definitely something that I think as we think about our designs to inspire creative learning, that we're also looking at that equity balance. So yeah, thank you.
I think I think putting an emphasis on on playfulness. I saw the word play in one of the presentations, I think in Tina's. And I think playfulness and creativity, we naturally find all students gravitating toward that. We don't have to target any population if we sort of put the emphasis back on sort of playfulness and, as you say, creativity. So
play for lifelong learning, which is the theme of this event, and I'll plant a seed for some future events that we'll be having as well. Let me pass back to Tony to ask the next question.
Thanks, Scott. Really appreciate the comments as well. All right, and again, have invited folks, if you have questions for Roundtable participants, feel free to please put it in the chat. If we should have some opportunities. Hey, and also would invite the Roundtable participants to ask questions of themselves, or as a panel, if say we were there in person. So this question is actually going to be for Kyle from Cisco and Davide from UNESCO. How do we strengthen opportunities for youth with coding skills to be engaged with and supporting community development? You know, we just heard in terms of, from Scott, the really important point in regards to it's not exclusively just about job skills training, it's about computational thinking. And in fact, as another plug, our next event in August, hands-on educational learning, we'll also have some organizations that will be specifically just talking about pre-computational skills, even if you have no computers. So just as a plug for our event in August. But let's assume sort of building a set of skills in computational thinking. How can young people use those skills to be specifically engaged in supporting the community around them? So maybe we'll start with Kyle. It's terrific to have you join us from Cisco. Let's start with you, and then we'll invite Davide for you to jump in as well. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Tony. And it's great to be part of the panel and to be across a group of wonderful people here today focused around important topics in education from all around the world, literally. So we should celebrate that. And thank you to the mEducation Alliance for bringing us together and your expertise to make this happen. I also want to call out to Sunil that I'm actually the second bit here. Hital Miraj from Nairobi with Cisco wanted to be here, and she sends her regrets, and unfortunately for the group, you have to settle for me from the Cisco Foundation. So next time, look for Hital Miraj, all right, from Cisco. So these are all wonderful points made by the team. I would say that to build on Scott's comments about creativity, I think I would add to that is that we also need to encourage students to be intentional. And as we build and look at coding skills globally, is to help students understand that to be creative often can be inspired by the communities around them, and that they have the power and the tools to overcome the barriers to education, to economic growth, to more evenly distributing services or critical human needs supplies around their communities. And it takes an intentional view, and that education, and particularly computational thinking and the application of technology, can help solve problems in communities all around the world. Communities don't have to wait for someone from another part of the world to come and try to offer a solution. That the hope at Cisco is that anyone can be a global problem solver. Anyone can look at a need that they have, or something that they feel needs to change in their community, and mobilize a team of people, prepare a plan, and use technology as a portion of that solution to make that happen. Cisco, for now going into its almost 4th year, has worked with and sponsored a program called Global Problem Solvers, the series. It's an animated series that's focused on a team of young people from a cross-disciplinary approach, from different backgrounds, speaking different languages, and from different cultures, coming together to solve problems in society. GPS, the series, is a free resource available to anyone, and I'd encourage any of you that have not seen that resource to go out and take a look at it. By being global problem solvers, everyone is encouraged to use technology to help solve a problem in their community. But it starts with being intentional, to have a plan, to see something that needs to change, and then act on that change. In addition to Global Problem Solvers, the series, there are opportunities to take advantage of Cisco Networking Academy. Many of you may know about Cisco Networking Academy and its network of partners throughout Africa, Asia, and the Americas, as well as the Middle East and Russia. And we encourage each of you to learn more about Networking Academy and how you can learn to build some of those specific IT skills over time. But in terms of problems and solving problems in communities, it starts with being intentional. It starts with seeing a need and then mobilizing people to act on that need. And I think resources like code.org and the programs that have been presented on this call help lay the groundwork for people to be prepared to do just that.
Thanks so much, Kyle. Hey, Kyle, what's an example of a specific community issue that has been addressed by GPS the series, or that you've seen noteworthy ones come through your innovation challenge? Just like a sector related, water, agriculture,
Sure.
Anything come to mind?
Absolutely. So in the case of, it varies by different cultures and different geographies. We see requests from, for instance, Latin America that relate to improving Wi-Fi access and creating mesh Wi-Fi solutions that are stood up and coordinated by community representatives to service their broader community to provide free internet access and cross the digital divide. We see ideas that come from parts of West, Central, or East Africa that involve around scarcity of resources and improving access to key resources that involve critical human needs, healthcare, as well as access to the internet and access to current and education-oriented programs. Also, we see in economies in Asia, organizations that are forming to start social enterprises that support around conservation and sustainability, to spread and share best practices around access to energy and sustainable living that can be beneficial to their community, but also help provide a source of income. So from the Global Problem Solver Challenge to GPS the series, these are programs that can move those ideas forward and encourage entrepreneurship with the application of technology.
Thanks so much, Kyle. And I've been dropping in the chat and links to some of those terrific programs that you've talked about, Kyle, including the Problem Solvers Challenge. Davide, how would you sort of address that issue in terms of your leadership and being a founder of the Youth Mobile activity and deep partner with Sunil and the Africa Code Week? What are examples that you might provide of sort of young people using their coding skills for supporting their communities?
Yes, first also would like to thank you for the invitation to this webinar. I think it's a great initiative. Also having all these people around the table, it's really great. I joined Sunil's comment about gender equality, and actually everything we are doing in the coding space actually was came exactly from the gender perspective, because we realized that there is a huge gap. I mean, everybody knew everybody knows there is a big gap in gender, and probably one of the way to get out of this is to exactly show that actually technology is actually about creativity. It is about empowerment. It is about being able to express yourself. So if you show this to young girls, to young people, I mean young boys and girls, of course, there's maybe a greater chance that their perspective, their understanding of technology is changing over time, and maybe they will not become an engineer, but that's not that's the problem. They will know something is possible and the solution can be found to their problems. And this is the hook actually that we try to really to take when going out with the projects on the ground. And our approach has been always to support existing projects and existing organizations where we could find them, so that not to reinvent something, but maybe to give some air, some breathing space to these initiatives, like some that we heard in the first part, which was super interesting, and so that they can expand, they can reach the critical mass and continue. and there are links to everything. So, I mean, I was very interested in the entire conversation here. In terms of impact for the community, I think what is important is exactly this sense. Is what is both said in the beginning was it's inspirational. It is about confidence. I think confidence is probably the word which is most important here, because once you have a problem, you have the confidence that you can actually do something about it. It's not. It's more about working together in a team and bringing in different competencies and different views, so to be able to make a solution. And we had a number of examples of very let's say very small things, but making differences, like tools for signaling problems in the slums, for example, in some cities, or mapping water places, etc. I mean, things that you may not think that are important for in general, but if you have a problem and you know that you can do something about it, you can find this kind of solutions. So also accessing to the courses, accessing to access to information about courses. How do I enroll in a course? And maybe I realize that people around me, they don't know this simple, let's say, the simple step. And our students, I mean, I call our students, but not really our students, is students of the organization we work with. They immediately started to make apps and making all sorts of information accessing material to do that. And we push them to use many of the tools according to their also let's say knowledge. So we are, of course, a big users of MIT's tools. We work with the app inventor team. For example, for a few years ago, I think they were also basically in our first ever meeting when we were deciding what to do. MIT was there, for example. They were very inspirational. So inspiration is one thing, but in order to be able to create solutions, even locally, you need to knowing how to code, having some knowledge about it is not enough. So that's a point for me in this particular question, because you have to build some sort of ecosystem around it. So we spoke about education. Education is a part of this ecosystem, because you want maybe to grow your knowledge about these things. You want to know more. So once you taste about the thing, you want to know more. Formal, non-formal education. But then, of course, you have, as was mentioned by our Cisco colleague, of course, you need as well the competencies that goes with it for making education possible. And by the way, Cisco was among our partners a long time ago in order to design the ICT competence framework for teachers, exactly to enable this part. And then you need entrepreneurial skills. You need access to investors. You need, I mean, making an app with App Inventor is maybe easy, but then of course to make something which is sustainably working and providing a service to the community, it's a totally different thing. So this is probably the next challenge when you want to make these things sustainable. But on the other hand, I think the basics is to have the literacy of coding, which is something that is actually important in all the digital scope. And probably we may talk later about how policy may intervene in this space.
Thanks, Davide. And also just emphasizing in terms of the foundation skills, like you mentioned sort of coding, and my sense is you also talked about digital literacy. In fact, we will be having separate events on digital literacy curricula and then drawing upon some of the great resources from the organizations that are part of this and other institutions, for example, referencing the European Commission's DigiComp frameworks and some of the work that UNICEF has done. But terrific just in terms of the mobilization for Africa Code Week, to be able to provide those foundation skills and training and to launch a variety of different areas for young people to be engaged. So again, really delighted to hear about it. Hey, John, just to complete this particular question, you mentioned some of the code for change, for example, IBM. Did you have any specific, like maybe a vignette that you want to provide about young people using their coding skills? You want to highlight for something they've done to make a difference in their community?
Thanks, Tony. So the program is actually Call for Code, right?
Call for Code.
Call for Code. So that's the global event. But that's, if I was to sort of go down to something that we are doing locally, in East Africa, there's the Digital Nation Africa that I was talking about. And I agree with the points that colleagues have mentioned. And just before I respond to your question, let me just tie in some of the points that have been mentioned and also bring in an important piece that I think we always miss out. I appreciate a lot of the inputs from various colleagues. I mean, they're all running various interesting programs, but I think one thing that ends up missing out is, you know, there's synergies, especially if we sort of come together. And I really like the fact that you brought us together in this kind of discussion, because, you know, you realize that different players in the space have got input that can fit one piece of the puzzle. I mean, I personally believe no single individual or organization can really sort out everything. And so when you bring in different partners together, then there's a lot of synergies. I like a colleague from Cisco who mentioned another good friend, Hital, who we work very closely within this region. So I think this kind of synergies are really important. I mean, I've talked about Digital Nation Africa, which is a great learning and innovation platform. But like some people have mentioned in the chat, you know, what if I'm working with a group that is in a refugee camp, for example, and they don't have connectivity and they don't have equipment. So yes, I could have a great thing. I could tell them about it, but again, you know, the connections don't happen. So if I bring in a telco, for example, who's then able to make available, you know, broadband internet, and another partner who's able to bring in equipment, and then, you know, that's when the magic happens. So I think this synergy and partnership is something that is really important. So I think going further as players in this space, I think we should really have these conversations more often. One thing, and let me just sort of disagree with my colleague Leonardo, who talked about here having these programs to scale in the formal education system. Maybe I misunderstood your point, but one thing I think is that we realize that not everybody can access these formal computer science, you mentioned, programs. But then something interesting, and actually from my experience, I see is that those who actually did not go into formal computer science programs actually turn out to be excellent coders, for that matter, since that's the discussion we're having around here. So on that point about going through formal computer science programs, I think I will disagree with you on that point, unless maybe I may have misunderstood the point that you mentioned. Tony, back to your point. So examples of things that young people have done using skill that they have learned through Digital Nation Africa, for example. I mean, there's tons. I mean, I know we have a few minutes, but you know, we can be here. We've got stories of young people who are now doing startup companies, or startup small businesses because of the skills that they have learned. And this sometimes these are individuals who did not get the opportunity to go to the, again, I challenge my colleague there, who did not have a chance to go to the formal computer science program. So they are now developing websites, and they're actually making gainful employment for themselves and also for other people that they work with. We have, I mean, I have stories of just during this time of COVID, we've realized that a lot of companies are actually looking to incorporate AI solutions into their businesses. So we have one example of a startup that in the last 3 weeks has hired 80 individuals. I mean, this is when you're seeing other people are sort of being put out of work, and here you've got some individual that has is looking to actually engage 80 individuals and possibly a few more just because of this opportunity they're seeing. And we're working through this particular program to actually enable them on AI skills for this startup that is working. So, I mean, we can go on and on. I mean, there's lots of examples. This is what I do on a daily basis. So, I mean, I can really speak to this impact that this kind of skill that we are enabling young people on.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Hey, Leo, just because John had mentioned you specifically to turn this into a little bit of a dialogue, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think there's a variety of paths, and we work institutionally with both formal and informal, but you think about the beneficiary and the paths that you could reach them. Leo, if you just want to provide a brief response or add to what John had said. Scott, maybe to turn it over to you for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the chat, and then we'll conclude. We'll try to conclude on time. So, Leo?
Thanks, Tony. Well, John is right. You need to reach the people that is not going to formal education. But Tony, you just gave a great answer to that. It's not mutually exclusive. Just to illustrate that, there are close to 2 billion students in the world. Code.org, for example, has 50 million accounts. You know, there are 50 million out of those almost 2 billion people that are using our platform. Scratch, which is another very popular platform, probably has a little bit over 50 million accounts as well. And this only illustrates the extent of the gap that we have across the world. For many years, and there's been efforts for many organizations, Tony mentioned digital skills. For over 20 years, various organizations have been trying to put computers in the education system and trying to bring all of this technology and content. And the reality is that many schools, the majority of the schools in the world, are not teaching computer science, which means that we're not even reaching those that are enrolled. And so there's a lot to do there. And of course, there's a lot of work that we need to do for those who are not accessing formal education. You know, and that's critical. Latin America, for example, has half of its youth is enrolled in K-12, the other half is not. And that's that. And I'm sure that if we go and we see the Africa stats, it's going to be very dramatic as well. So we need to do it all. But I do think that accessing formal education is a great way to democratizing access to computer science, and that should be a good start. I'll stop there.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks. I saw John's thumbs up as well. Also in the spirit, John, of exactly what this event was designed to do. First of all, just great thanks for all of the presenters and participants. There are some advantages to virtual events, quite frankly. Being able to have so many participants from around the world join us. Scott, I remember talking with you maybe a few months ago and thinking about going from a physical to a virtual event and talking about there is an opportunity there. But bearing in mind what's been noted, including one of our colleagues, Jackie Streeker from UNHCR, to pick up on the point that John, that you mentioned, how do we get these skills? How do we democratize this to get it to more learners of any age, wherever they are? We are cognizant of an event about Coding Global that presumes a certain level of access. That's why we want to balance the series of Symposia events with other discussions, including, as I mentioned, our session next month on hands-on educational learning that really is offline, and other manipulables that you could use to access education resources. Maybe, Nicole, if you could put up the closing slide, and then I want to turn it over to Scott to give us a little bit more advertisement of upcoming events, so we can conclude on time. So over to you, Scott.
All right, thanks, Tony, and thanks really to everybody, you know, from our roundtable panel, the second hour, and all the participants who contributed, and our presenters. Thank you so much. So as Tony said, you know, there are a lot of advantages to moving to this virtual format. The fact that we've been able to convene a range of folks from a range of time zones that maybe might not be able to come in person. So I think that right there is great. So this has been a wonderful event, lots of good energy, and I appreciate all the good comments and feedback. We have 2 more events up and coming. Tony mentioned the next one, hands-on educational games for lifelong learning, which will be on August 18th, which is focusing on tech and non-tech games for certain subject learning. And then Play Every Day, which will be a really big event, which will be in partnership with the LEGO Foundation and other colleague partners and sponsors, where we're focusing on the impact of play in terms of a learning pedagogy and what range of activities do play-based interventions play in formal and non-formal education settings. So that will be very interesting. The format, which I'll mention very briefly, will be similar to this, pitch presentations, but we're also looking at having demo spaces and hands-on spaces and some interactive workshop type elements in the virtual format. And then in addition to that, you know, I just want to pick up on a comment that John mentioned. Thank you to for your comments of appreciation about this format. We too agree that it's great to convene this range of stakeholders and different folks. And to that end, the conversation will continue specifically as it relates to digital literacy and Coding Global with the Digital Literacy Partners Fora. Stay tuned to the website and our e-news for updates on that. But again, the conversation will continue. We're keen to gather your input specifically on this future engagement. What does it look like? And I believe there's a survey that's going to be dropped into the chat or shared just, oh, there it is. At the, let's see, is there a link at the bottom? Well, you can send feedback to the email link below. But again, we really appreciate the engagement. We really appreciate the energy, and there's a lot of things happening. Please take a look at our e-news, which comes out weekly. You can subscribe if you go to the website, and you get event registration reminders, as well as we have a new online publication that's about to roll out, EdTech Connected, which will feature cutting-edge innovations in the EdTech space. So we look forward to your contributions, and yeah, thank you ever so much.
And maybe just close out is maybe Nicole, if you could put the screen up of you, Lissa, Davis, and Julie. Just want to thank, just as we start, when you have a movie, you don't know if you do the credits at the beginning or at the end, and I think you should do them at both places. There is a lot of hard work just to organize an event like this, so I want to thank Nicole and Julie, Lisa, Alyssa, and Davis for their support. Maybe a round of applause for our first hour presenters again, and for our roundtable participants. Please let us know if we can improve this type of event in the future. And if there might be ways that you want to contribute. I think we'll just conclude. You know, we're just a few minutes over. We started a few minutes late, and want to thank you.
Sorry, Sunil. Sorry to interrupt. There were some questions. If those can be sent to us, we'll provide some answers and you can distribute that.
That's perfect. So Sunil, a great point. First of all, again, I would encourage folks to capture the chat, or we'll capture it also, some of those questions as well. And then we'll make those available as a follow-up, and look forward to having you engage us in the follow-up dialogue as well. So again, round of applause, or hands waving, or whatever else. Thank you everybody for joining us for morning and afternoon.
Tony and everybody, I certainly see Sunil very soon, but I hope to keep the link.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks everyone, and Nicole and the team as well. And we'll see you in a few weeks' time. Join us for our next event.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you all. Keep well.